So what I want to do here is just a really brief kind of overview of some resources and some models. And I'm only going to spend maybe 15 minutes or so here. Hopefully, or it sounds like you all were kind of sharing some of the work you do. And I know some of you all shared it even in your intros around career exploration, but also want to give some time after covering a few things here for you all to say what best practices or models or resources that you have for this. So just as kind of to set us on the context of what we're doing here today, we are focusing on career exploration. So I think most of you on the line, and if you're not, it is linked in here. Looking in this dictionary, a big goal and a value of this dictionary is that it gets us all kind of speaking the same language when we say we're going to do career exploration, when we say we're going to do a team-based challenge, when we say we're going to do a career development experience. So this experience, particularly along the WBL continuum, are those activities such as a job shadow, attendance at a career exposition, which I know even Nancy spoke to earlier and the work alignment does, or an employer site visit, right? But really, ultimately, the key pieces of this definition is that it's providing an individual with the ability to engage directly with employers for the purpose of gaining knowledge of one or more industry sectors or occupations. So whenever you're designing a career exploration or thinking through what that's going to look like, is really how are you engaging these individuals, these youth, these students, right, with employers who can be a variety of spaces, right? So they can be your typical like corporations you think about within your community, but they can also be your post-secondary institutions, your community-based organizations, right? I think we really sometimes have to maybe reconsider like who we tend to think of right away as our industry expert and understand that we have a lot of industry experts in our space beyond corporations, right? Beyond what we think of as like formal employers. We are all like at an employer, right? So we all within our own spaces can even provide that expertise and that guidance. And again, another big takeaway is that youth, individuals, participants of these experiences, they're not just learning about one occupation or kind of like a very boxed in view of that industry sector, but they're really learning about the diversity of experiences within that, right? And so what I'm going to talk through here are just, again, some different models and resources to spur thinking as you all move into the designing and workshop phase. And so a flag again here, really thinking about the work-based learning continuum and supporting individuals where they're at, where they're starting at along their trajectory. I used to manage a 10-month internship program, and it's an incredible experience, but it's made more valuable and more meaningful if an individual has completed some other experiences before that, right? So that by the time they get to their internship or their career development experience, they've engaged in that industry. They've started to really grapple with like where they want to fit into that, what skills they have, where their passions are, what goals they need to set for themselves to be successful. And so career exploration really sits along the beginning of that continuum. It occurs, after an individual has engaged in some career awareness activities, which tend to be more kind of passive and informal. Maybe they're taking some surveys or watching some videos, right? Career exploration is likely the first time that they're truly engaging with an employer or an industry expert and able to ask them questions and hear directly from them in the moment. And so a big piece here is really thinking through what is that meaningful participant engagement, and the event itself is important, right? But there's also the steps leading up to the event, and there's the steps that occur after the event. So a component when you all are in your kind of design spaces today is really thinking through how are individuals being prepared and how are they being supported within, a classroom space or within an organization, within a club, right? How are they being supported to maybe do some research on the organizations or people that will be at that? Starting to think of some questions to ask. I think a big learning piece I always had when we would do guest speaker panels with our high school seniors was that some of them really had questions to ask and others them needed a moment to develop those. And it was difficult for them to think of them right in the moment. And so giving them some time to research, to have those questions ready, and to have those in front of them so that they feel more confident. They've refined their question. They don't feel like they're going to ask like a dumb question, right? That can be a fear of students, but they really have like thought through that and they've worked out it. But they're folks who are helping organize them to have a quality question that really fits their needs and fits their wants for what they want to know about that person or about that organization. And then during too, just a flag here to make sure that whatever staff or teams are kind of helping with this event, that they're, facilitating presentations, interactions, they're encouraging questions. If you all think back to the first time that you had to engage in small talk or networking with folks outside of a school or kind of youth development space, it can be really intimidating. And so how you can kind of help ease that awkwardness and be a resource for both the presenters and for the participants, right, is really helpful. And I did this in my program, and I've seen some other programs do this too. That seems to be this, it seems small, but it's a really fun thing for youth and also for the partners who are presenting, is if you can provide little business cards that give their name and their email address on there. Typically in terms of in the high school space, it tends to be their school email, right? So that you're not working with any communication or issues with that, and the personal is allowable, right? But it's just a great way for them to be able to walk up, make a connection. Even if students or participants, right? I tend to say students because of my high school teacher brain, but if they have a LinkedIn, even that they can have before this event, right? It just kind of builds that muscle of networking and staying connected. And then that after piece too. So how they're reflecting on their experience, what insights did they gain, questions that they still have. We say this a lot when we talk about this in IWIN and in work-based learning generally, but if they go to that career exploration event and they're like, I thought I wanted to be this, and I'm hearing about their life and this, that, whatever, I'm actually over it. I'm kind of rethinking my path here. That's a good thing, right? It's a good thing for them to understand that in a real tangible way early on, and to kind of then pivot and think about what else would they like to explore. And then also really, I'll talk about this too. There's been a lot of models that I'm seeing lately, especially in this virtual space, where the post-secondary partners are also attending these career exploration events. And they're giving really detailed information on what is the education, what is the training, what does it mean to, go to that community college, for example, and transfer, or can you get an associate's that leads right towards that career, or are there apprenticeship programs, right? So linking that into your conversations with employers or industry folks is just really helpful for students to continue to really set realistic goals as they're continuing on their path, understanding what courses they need to take, what experiences they need to have, what skills they need to build, is very helpful. So here's kind of some flags for industry experts, right? Definitely a big piece here to make sure that the participants have opportunities to engage in small groups or one-on-one with industry folks. If you have, a room of 30 and one speaker, it's very likely that maybe 28 of those people in that room will never ask a question or never say anything, because there'll be 2 participants in that room who tend to ask all the questions and be the ones who feel really capable and confident to ask those. So creating those smaller spaces where they can really engage one-on-one. And small groups can be helpful too, 2 to 3 students or youth, right? Just so that, again, I think kind of understanding your participants and understanding where they would be able to engage one-on-one, or maybe it'd be helpful to be in that small group to build up their confidence for that. Would also say, beyond, as you expand your idea of industry experts, think about youth who have experience in the industry area. So maybe they're college or they're even high school students in that CTE program. They might be alumni from the school you're with, or they might be students at a local post-secondary institution. Or again, in this virtual world, they could really be attending school anywhere, right? Depending on the setup for your event. But thinking through engaging them as well as ambassadors for programs, ambassadors for those industry area, and pursuing those occupations. They are the ones who are currently kind of in the weeds working through that, and can really give some tangible information on what it means to engage in that pathway. Also, just a flag here, I think we typically think a lot of industry folks as coming in and presenting, right? But we've seen a lot of great examples where they actually come in and facilitate a workshop that might even be connected to the curriculum within that course. And, there's time for questions at the end too, and they're kind of talking through their role, talking through their occupation, but also engaging individuals in kind of a hands-on activity to keep them engaged too. Just some different flags for best practices here, and these are applicable both virtual and in person. Really keeping presentation short and conversational. I think this past year looking at a screen, but just generally looking at a screen, right, is difficult. But minimizing that, minimizing any pre-recorded content and career exploration, they really should be engaging live with these individuals. But these virtual options really have been great. And I think you all have experienced this about reaching partners and especially new partners. You know, once you couldn't accommodate a large tour, small businesses, entrepreneurs, unique work sites. You know, I always think my husband's a photographer, and for him to like bring individuals onto the different studios and work sites that he goes to wouldn't necessarily be possible, but he could definitely do like a virtual engagement of that, right? Providing day in the life information, you know, yes, they want to know about the industry and occupations within there. They also want to know if you like your job. What do you get paid? What hours are you working? Like, what does it look like day to day? What was your pathway from high school to career, right? What's your work-life balance? You know, I mean, they really want to know those things. And then also thinking to these like next 2 points, right? If individuals, if youth are going to see themselves pursuing a path, and they need to see themselves already on that path and in that occupation, right? So where you can feature panelists who are of different races, genders, personal experiences, educational pathways, right? Especially showcasing diversity and careers that we might think that we don't typically see them in, right? Like a male nurse, for example, right? Every time we think of a nurse, it's like a woman, right? So showing a male, especially a male of color who's a nurse. I heard you all talking about education, you know, and it's definitely a growing need that we need more males of color in education, but where you can show them and talk about their pathway and what that looked like, and maybe challenges they overcame or successes that they had, how they got through that, is just really impactful for students. So the more that you can feature that, the more students can see themselves in those careers. And also focusing on those early career experiences. So, you know, the CEO, the vice president is cool, but, you know, they've likely been in that role so long, right? They have good information to share, but folks who are really early on in their career, they can be a bit more relevant. They can be a bit more engaging. They're still maybe in like the honeymoon phase of their career. They're still loving life, right? They haven't gotten like bogged down by bureaucracy, but they can just really provide that engaging experience. And again, are more closely, we're more close to that pathway experience and having gotten their education, and so can provide some really relevant information there. And this will be a part of the designing too, is just how you're coaching your employers on keeping their jargon to a minimum, how they're explaining content, how you're even setting expectations and preparing them to engage youth, right? We can't always assume that these folks know how to engage youth in an interactive and meaningful way. And so just some different examples here, you know, Career Expo, I know Nancy has spoken to this and could definitely speak to this more, but these are events you see, you know, they typically have tables or a booth. It's a bigger event, right? Definitely seen some examples where families are invited, and there's almost 2-generation approaches there. So families are also being engaged, even as adult learners, right? Where they might be able to connect back to a pathway or a program. We've seen some fun things too with hosting a conference. Saw this in education. So actually a school put on like a mini conference, and they had breakout rooms. And so the students were getting some professional development. The sessions were led by some post-secondary representatives, you know, educators from like a central office. And so it could be focused on one area, or it could even be interdisciplinary, but it's a fun way to even turn like a school space or a community space into a conference setting. You know, and even if there's some sort of like career exploration camp, as you're thinking about some of those younger ages too, where there might be some sort of multi-day experience, they're exploring different occupations, especially as you're working with younger students, definitely those hands-on activities throughout the experience. So our high school intern actually, who just graduated, now moving on to be a college student, incoming freshman, they presented on a really cool networking night that they did, and their school set up. They had drinks and tables, and they were non-alcoholic drinks, but they had drinks and tables and signs all over the school. It was decorated. The students were dressed up. They had business cards, and the industry folks actually attended one of these. I was next to someone from the DMV, which was interesting. I learned a lot about the DMV, but they knew kind of where different industries were based on signs at the tables. And so students kind of walked up and they asked questions and talked for a little and then walked away. It was very much a way to practice that small talk space and to feel I don't know, it felt very fancy and fun for everyone, right? And then the next one here, and this was presented on recently on IWIN, but the Evanston's Mayor's Employer Advisory Council put on some virtual career panels this past year that they're going to continue to host and engage with. And so they did 7 different panels. They were each aligned to the endorsement areas related to the College and Career Pathway endorsement and the Post-Secondary Workforce Readiness Act. And so they recorded these afterwards and put them on the website. But the format, you know, they'd have those 4 local employers. They would tell their stories, present information. They would talk about benefits even within their organization, you know, like tuition reimbursement practices, additional training that's offered there. But a big piece that they were able to do this year, and again, as much as a struggle as virtual was, it kind of allowed for these increased collaborations. They brought in Oakton Community College to really talk about, you know, the department chair of that section that they were addressing, how to apply to Oakton, the student supports that are offered there, dual credit courses that they could take now if they want to pursue that pathway. And so it really made it tangible for students, like what they could start doing now in high school as they want to pursue that pathway, while they're also hearing from employers telling them what they need to do to get into that occupation. Put this on here too. This was, I think, presented like our kickoff IWIN actually. We had Washington State came in and talked about their Career Connected Home. Really putting this in here as a resource. It's very similar to what Evanston did, but they have an incredible toolkit with a lot of different resources that you can just take and edit and modify to fit your space. But you can see all their different videos on YouTube. It's all recorded there. But they did about 6 weeks of program and 29 different sessions. So it's quite an undertaking, but the toolkit is an incredible resource for you all. One of my favorite things to do through IWIN is to just get you all resources. And so Chicago Public Schools published a work-based learning toolkit. I work closely with them and their team to develop this. It's based off of a New York City Department of Education toolkit, but they modified it and worked together with them to make sure it fits our state framework. So it fits our work-based learning continuum and definitions. And so if you click on each of these are all different types of career exploration. They have checklists for teachers, for students, for partners. They have implementation tools. Again, it's a really great space to just go and get those resources that sometimes take up a ton of bandwidth just to make. Also put in an example here for a manufacturing space where they hosted an open house for both students and parents and families. You know, I've heard different times that manufacturing, there just tends to be this, what's the word I want to use? Like there tends to be this idea of what manufacturing is without understanding like all the different occupations within manufacturing. And this is true for many industry areas. But this is a chance where, again, engaging families, engaging parents in those activities helps to kind of like dispel some of those ideas, their former experiences, talk about what things look like now. Because we know with a lot of youth, they are working with their family to make decisions. They're not making decisions independently. Their family is a big piece of their decision making as they pursue college and career pathways. And so engaging them in these experiences is vital to keep students on that path and be making those decisions and setting goals for themselves. And JFF2 has a really jobs for the future. They're always a national leader who has models from across the nation here. But they have a whole kind of book here with resources and guides, again, for students, staff, and partners, all about career and college exploration experiences.